Alright, welcome back everyone to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures, A2RC here. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build, explain, upgrade, and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start a new adventure with me. So we're on maybe one or two of the last episodes for this stock disassembly Mantis GP. We're going to go ahead and take the rest of this apart and show the last remaining components of this rear-wheel drive 10 scale touring car. Again, these were produced and released in the mid and late 1990s. We've got this Kyosho silicone receiver guard. Let's go ahead and just dive right into this thing. These were designed to have the battery pack on one side and the receiver on the other, keeping this nose section pretty slender, and the weight bias is way more to the rear than to the front. We're going to talk about that weight distribution and weight bias on the upgraded version. These particular straps on here are essentially the same or very, very similar to what the HPI RS4 series touring cars had. Standard 4-cell alkaline non-rechargeable battery pack. I guess you could use rechargeable individual cells if you wanted. We're going to talk about battery packs probably with the upgraded version on different options that you may have for these cars and others, and then what I decided to do for the upgraded version. More than likely this stock version is going to get that upgraded battery pack too. I had custom ones made. I designed them here and then sent out the information to a company in UK, and they had those produced and then sent off to me. So nothing real too exciting about that, right? So here are these reclosable, very vintage style. I don't know if you find any battery pack holders like this anymore. Push that little piece down there and get that bound, and it's just cinched onto this bottom plate. Take a look here. Just a little tray. We can take that tray off. 4 screws. On the upgraded version, we keep the battery pack here on this right-hand side of the car. We do utilize this battery tray, but in a little different way. Got a number of different components. We're going to take out the fuel tank. It's sandwiched in between this left and right plastic compartment or components. Got the throttle and brake steering servo here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that 4mm aluminum chassis. The aluminum section is only in the rear, where the most of the weight is on the chassis and where the engine is. These are non-countersunk, normal pan head coarse thread screws. We do an upgraded feature on this chassis on the on the upgraded Mantis, which we will take a look at, but not until we're done here. Let's go ahead and, it's like I'm bound by wires. Let's take off this receiver. You can see why there's things that, as we progress through the years of the hobby, why some things stay and some things go away. On the upgraded Mantis, you're gonna see that, and I'll show you in depth, that we do not keep the receiver on the side of the car. It's formally relocated. Hopefully that'll help with any strikes to the chassis. But it's the same style holder. Let me take that off here real quick. Right now we've got that whole spaghetti mess of wires off. Here's the chassis with the servo. Last in place. The stock version, I guess we'll keep these Futaba 3003 version servos. These were very, very common. I guess they are still common today, but very baseline, very basic entry, bushing style analog servos. They do a job. They don't, of course, do the job very well, but they do the job. And since that's what these Mantis came with on this stock version, that's what we'll keep, but we'll do a full test of them, make sure that everything works properly. So let's set that aluminum chassis to the side. So now we're stripping it down here. Not a lot of components left, but nonetheless we need to go through them. Here's the standard style two-way on-off switch. Remember, the pull start is over here on this side. We just took off the receiver on this left-hand side. So this switch will probably be replaced to a three-way switch, even though this will be a stock version, because more than likely we're going to use a rechargeable receiver pack on this car, and the three-way switches are great so that you can leave the battery pack on and still charge the pack while it's mounted to the car. That way you can do a more permanent attachment. Of course, nothing is really permanent, but a more permanent battery pack install with some servo tape and some zip ties kind of thing. Let's go ahead and take that switch out. We don't have to do it right now, but let's go ahead and do it while we're all here together. There very well may be some newcomers in the hobby, whether it's for EP, electric stuff, or even for Nitro, that some of these basic components, they generally are messed with, because a lot of the stuff today is in ready-run style cars, and as long as the switch works, a lot of people, whether they're novice or experienced in the hobby, they tend to leave stuff alone. But let's not be afraid to dive in. Things are repairable, replaceable, fixable, and there's a lot of updates that we can do. There are switches that are low profile and high profile. Through the 20 plus years in the hobby, I really prefer the high profile switch, and maybe this is going down a small rabbit hole, but for two main reasons. One, you just have a little more finger grip wherever that switch is located, so that you can turn it on and off when needed. And depending on how custom kind of builds you're making, how different or how you're going to modify or make modifications to cars, that longer switch length is helpful depending on where you're mounting that switch. It may still be going in the stock location, but you might be, for example, on an RS4, you might be changing out that upper deck to maybe a carbon fiber, aluminum, or something different, and you need, or that deck thickness is now changed. Maybe it's a little bit thicker. So those long profile receiver pack switches help to manage that difference. Now you may still need to get some longer screws or something to help manage now that change, but that's just a part of the fun of modifying. Here's that, we're on the left side. This is a little antenna tube holder. These actually pop out and you can reposition them, relocate them, take them off completely if you want. These fuel tanks are pretty standard even for today's Kyosho cars. Of course, there are small differences, but this particular one, it just kind of slides in, and there's a little tab here, or a little void that these tank tabs go into, and then it just sandwiches it together. So this tank will be completely taken apart, cleaned, washed, and checked for seal, ready to go once we put it back in. Normal, standard, red or orange color silicone O-ring underneath the lid. Spring tension still are good. These come with a primer, and there's an O-ring down inside of there. I do not prefer these primer tanks. Doesn't mean that you can't use them. I think it provides, it's a preference thing. It provides a feature for, I think, maybe more novice folks. You don't need a primer. There's a lot of other easier ways to prime your carburetor to your engine, but this is one. But we're going to leave it on there, of course, being that this is the stock version. This is a pretty universal tank that Kyosho had. Notice we have the pressure inlet here, but we have another pressure inlet. So, and these are not removable, so they just put a little silicone cap on there. These have a tendency of leaking, especially as they get old and they dry and they lose their elasticity. But we're going to check that out. And then look on the bottom, pretty much the same thing. We have the fuel outlet that goes to the carb, and there's just another silicone nipple. The upgraded version has these as well, but there's a small update that I've done to this bottom cap that I'll show you when the time comes. These have 2 holes here on the bottom, little standoffs, integrated plastic standoffs that you could use on a different car or truck. Those would probably screw from the bottom. So that'll get cleaned up. So we've got that left side. We've got this handle, and also chassis support, this center chassis support. Got this front center section. This goes to that back section that bolts down onto the metal chassis. Let's take off this right hand side. Same exact part. They pretty sure they made it modular. So we've got this right hand side, left hand side. So no, they're not modular, meaning that you can swap them. There is actually an R and there's actually an L that went onto the mold. Now they're very similar, of course, right? The basic features are the same, but notice on this left-hand version we have our screw holes here, but nothing on his side, that side. It still has a switch hole, so you could swap that receiver switch to another side if you wanted, but they're not modular, but they're very similar. They are symmetrical in a sense, but not the same. So we took off that left side wheel and axle when we talked about our bearings. We have one set screw here that adjusts that spring tension. We have it on both sides. Let's go ahead and whip off this front plastic bumper. It's held on with some M3 bolts on the other side. That's another update. A very small, update, but that's another update that's on the other car that we'll discuss. So there's 2 screws on the bottom, 2 screws on the face. Pretty standard bumper. And these screws to the side. A little overview here. So the steering servo is another Futaba 3003. This is all one molded component. So the way that they have these servos, it's kind of sandwiched similar to the fuel tank. Breaking down your cars, whether they're brand new or new to you, is really important. I would say the two main reasons. One, you have an opportunity to clean the car, but the other big opportunity is you get to like observe, especially if it's a brand new car to you, you get to observe how all these pieces go together. Yeah, it is great to have manuals, and that definitely helps, especially on rebuilds that you can't do all at once. I mean, we all have pretty good memories. I definitely do not have an eidetic memory, but I have a pretty good memory. But making videos or taking pictures along the way, taking notes, are all important. Things. So here's there's a left side little sandwich piece. There's a right side, same piece. More than likely these are going to be the exact same thing. So your servo comes out here. Let's take off the servo horn. So even though there's not a whole lot going on up here, this gives us a chance to check components. This servo horn has a built-in servo saver, a little plastic piece that'll spread and help save the servo in a crash. This is not the same design, but a very similar concept to what HPI did. And we're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff. Every single topic is an important topic, and servo savers are something that's important. We'll talk about why and when you can or should use them on touring cars, times that you can get away with not using them, reasons why even though you may want them, you delete them. Talk about in the future different styles of servo savers. Some are integrated into the steering rack, some are directly onto the servo itself, how they are different and the same, and why maybe you would want one version or another depending on what you're doing. That's all kind of topics that are in the future for the channel. I think there's a couple different style builders. You got some folks that literally just plug and chug, and they, whether it's a kit or not, they do it just to get the job done. And then there's people more like myself that really enjoy the process of the build or the disassembly. Sometimes disassembly is not very fun, especially when it's in an old dirty car or truck, but it's well worth it to go through the process to get familiar with your car and the components within it, and get it all cleaned up. Sometimes there are defective or damaged parts that are hidden underneath dirt. So here's our suspension. Got our camber link here, plastic, similar to HPI in the sense that it's plastic, but very dissimilar in the sense that these use screws that go through and then mount to different portions of the chassis. HPI had a ball stud and plastic ball end links. But we're going to discuss, this is a main topic for the upgraded version Mantis, what we do with these camber links, and you'll see why when that time comes. So There's a number of different modifications to the suspension, mainly on that upgraded version. So let me just spin this around. All one big molded piece here. There's this plastic retainer for the control arm pin or fulcrum down inside of here. So we'll take that apart off camera. We'll go through the last bushings on that spindle, and then we'll be able to have all of our subcomponents ready to go back together and complete the restoration, the rebuild on this mid-90s two-wheel drive GP Mantis from Kyosho. So I hope you enjoy this process and this teardown of the Kyosho Mantis two-wheel drive GP, which has the GX12 CR engine, which will stay. We went through another earlier video you can check out on the playlist of the engine disassembly and discussion. That's the engine that will come back and go on to this 10-scale touring car. So feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Share this with your friends, family, your buddies, girlfriends, whoever likes 10 scale, whoever likes Nitro in general, especially touring cars. This is a place to be, so thanks for taking the adventure with me.